Hello, Michelle.
Hey, Katie.
Episode 14, Rebel Therapy Podcast. And today we are talking about creative adaptations, autonomy. We will explore.
Yes.
Jump in.
Yes,
Shall
exactly.
we get into it?
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's one of the core concepts of Gestalt therapy. And as you know, we're both Gestalt therapists. I don't need to tell you that, but, just reminding other people.
I know this. The other people might need to be reminded. I wanted to say, can I share my story of this morning? I'm part of this gym. I love this gym. They're amazing. They push us and they do things and it's all very exciting. Lots of personal attention. Anyway, whatever. So I showed up today thinking I was going to do my front squat. So I was very excited about that. I've been on this whole trajectory and it's all been great. Showed up. The owner of the gym was there. His second in command was there. And it was all thrown out the window. We were supposed to do this other thing. And it was this weird, crazy, and very dramatic kind of challenge that I did not sign up for. I didn't want to do it. It's not interesting to me. The guy was like, okay, so nobody signed up for this thing. So we're all going to do it. And I was immediately frustrated and oppositional. And in my mind, I was like, fuck you. I don't want to do this. If I'd wanted to do it, I would have signed up. I didn't sign up. I don't want to do it. Anyway, but then it was a competition and I had to compete with other people. I was fueled by spite and I did the whole thing. I ended up being the fastest in the cohort. I finished the whole thing. I thought I was going to die. I didn't. It was good. And that was fine. Right. But the idea is that I didn't want to do it. I had decidedly not signed up for it because I didn't want to do it. And then I showed up and the guy's like, no, we're all doing it. Immediately, I'm 14 years old again. I don't want to do this thing. And yet, instead of walking away, which I could have done, I kind of dug in and thought, I'm paying for this. It's an exercise anyway. I'm already here. I might as well do it. Right? You heard my point, right? That I didn't want to do it. I felt immediately oppositional. I felt like I was 14 years old. I could have walked away, but I chose not to. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to dig in.
Yeah, I guess it's like you made the adulting calculation, right? Which we often do in our daily lives where you're like, oh, I paid for it. I'm already here. I got to exercise. All of these kind of practical considerations and things
Agreed.
that you care more about when you're an adult than you were, at 14. And
yep. Well, and they're also up to me.
Again.
No. And they're up to me as an adult, right? I can make decisions, at 14, you don't really have the opportunity, or certainly I didn't have the opportunity to make the choices that I wanted to, at least not entirely. Whereas now I could have walked away. I could have been like, you know what? I didn't sign up for this. I don't want this. I'm out. But I chose something else. But I think the point is I chose and I had the option to choose. Yeah.
If we define what a creative adjustment is and what you're kind of talking about in the lens that we're focusing on is the idea that we all come up with these different survival strategies as we're growing up and confronted with challenges and maybe lack of support in certain areas. And you come up with these strategies to keep you safe and let you survive. And they worked. And you're here, right? But,
indeed,
if left unexamined, perhaps, and you're using the same strategy that you were using when you were 10, without that lens of even perspective or choice or awareness, maybe it's not the best choice for you anymore. Maybe you don't need to just be surviving. Maybe you have more autonomy and you can make better decisions for yourself and approach it differently.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. I do. I think that's a really good point.
Would you add anything to it in terms of definition of a creative adjustment?
Only from the perspective that I think that we develop our creative adjustments, or a different type of therapy would call it coping mechanism, survival strategy, whatever it is, in accordance to what is present or perhaps absent in our environment growing up, and in accordance with our personalities. So as you know, there's a distinction between personality traits that we are born with that are steady and constant by about 2 years old. These are the personality traits that we have. And then our learned strategies that are not inherent, not innate, right? They're learned. And I think that there can be confusion around that stuff as we get older because we've done it for so long that whatever is learned feels innate. So I just want to make that little bit of distinction. The other thing that I want to say about creative adaptations, and you've touched on this already, is that we learn these things when we're very young and they work and they get us to the point where we are now as adults. This type of therapy is not about throwing away the strategies that you have developed for yourself as children with no support that are perhaps inefficient. It's more about looking where the gaps are, looking for the gaps in our knowledge and then filling those. So complementing the strategies that we currently have. And even today, my strategy of saying, fuck you, fueled by spite, I'm going to do it anyway, was actually very helpful. It was useful. And I didn't have an alternative when I was a kid, which maybe wasn't ideal. I could have just walked out. I could have said, no, I don't feel like it. But I chose to use it, which is very useful. It's something around the choice and also the idea of being autonomous and having the option to sort of, I don't know, rifle through our Rolodex of strategies, ideally, right? And then choosing
Sure.
the
Well, I
one that is
mean,
best suited for the situation.
exactly. You have to have developed other strategies because if that's the only strategy you have, then that's your default strategy for that situation.
Yeah.
So if you haven't learned any new skills or you haven't actively examined that in any way, then you're going to go to the same default. And it feels like you have no choice, right? Because you're back in that programmed response of this is
Yeah.
what I have to do to survive.
If you have one strategy, that is the definition of not having choice. You don't have an alternative. This is all you have. That being said, it probably works because it's gotten us here. We're surviving. That's fine. But it is about augmenting the options that you have to choose from and then leaning into that idea of choice and autonomy. I think it results in feeling more fulfilled, happy, whatever, feeling like you have more control over your life, which I think is important. And that's what this type of therapy can help with, right? It's figuring out what the strategies are that are kind of rigid because, to your point, maybe that's the only one you had, or maybe you had two, maybe you had three. The whole idea of having the hammer in your toolbox and that's supposed to be useful for every task, as opposed to, complementing whatever the combination of tools that you have and being able to choose the right tool for the right job.
Absolutely. I think that question of choice is the real heart of it. To feel like you're forced into something that you have no choice to say no also means you have no choice to say yes. You're in the thing and trying to survive, as opposed to you might be faced with all kind of shitty decisions. Like there's definitely moments in an adult life where the options are not great. I think people fool themselves into saying, well, I had no other option. Like it had to be this. And you're like, did it?
Not really. You did have
Not
choices,
really.
maybe shitty ones, but you did have choices. Yeah, exactly.
And like that reframe of just being like, it's like the moving towards something consciously as
Mhm.
opposed to being pushed towards something unconsciously.
Yes. And I also think that if we remember that every choice is a choice, right? So if we remember our autonomy in the situation, it makes even the difficult choices easier to manage or easier to accept, perhaps, easier to experience for sure. Right. If I know that I'm in the situation and it's not great, but I'm choosing it because the alternative is to blow it up and walk out, right? Sure. Again, as an adult, much more than as a child, I do have choices. I am where I choose to be, and I can choose to be somewhere else. And maybe the choices are not great. Maybe you're choosing between two terrible situations. At least it's a choice, though. And I think that sense of autonomy makes things a little bit easier to manage, easier to
For sure.
stomach, perhaps.
For sure. The first step in that is gaining awareness around what are your creative adjustments or coping
Yeah.
strategies, and then getting really familiar with it from a different angle
Yes.
and exploring how you might approach that situation differently. Like, what are your other options and why have you ruled them out at this point?
Once you realize you have other options, why are you choosing this one when you've got 6 or 7 others? Let's say. Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good point.
Sorry,
So
were
for
you
me this morning, it was definitely spite. I was annoyed. I went through with it because I was there and I trust the guy who put the program in place and I like the gym and the community's lovely. I really didn't want to do it, but I thought, fuck it. All right, fine. And I did it and it was hard. And then I felt great at the end. So it was a calculated risk, I think. And even in that moment, when I was feeling as resistant as I was, or oppositional, depending how you want to say that, I still made a calculation. And that's one of the benefits of being an adult and being able to integrate that type of creative adaptation. When I was a child, there was no calculation possible. It was just do it, don't do it, survive, don't survive. As an adult, I have so much more perspective, and I do have the alternatives that I could choose. And so I chose the one that I thought was the best. And as it turns out, it was a great experience.
You guessed right.
Yay, adulting. When we're making these decisions, they are educated guesses based on the experiences that we've had. That's partly why, as children, we're not very good at it because we haven't had much experience, right? So either way, it's a learning opportunity, and we learn more.
Yeah, and totally. And I think like it depends also like how troubling that coping strategy is for you. Like, say it's something that pushes you into a trauma response, or it's very distressing to be in that state of pushing out of spite or anger. Do you know what I mean? And like the distinction between so in that like say in that instance, that's kind of what came up for you, like your ability to recognize that and be like, okay, actually I am going to stop. This might work, but now it's not working and it's not worth it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I know for me, there have been times where I have kind of consciously chosen something that does put me into one of my creative adjustments. And then afterwards, it's like, that was just not worth it. That just felt awful the whole time. I don't want to be back in that state or whatever it is. And then being like, okay, now I know I need to be more careful around this strategy.
But that to me is the win that comes with being a little bit older and having more perspective, right? I mean, that is exactly, I would argue, in a smaller way, what I stepped into this morning, right? I didn't know. I made a decision based on being snide, being snippy, being frustrated and oppositional that I was going to do it, whatever, fine. It could have been terrible. I could have walked away going, wow, that was a terrible experience. But I took a chance and that was fine. And it didn't seem all that risky because as an adult person, I have so much more perspective. So I still think it's a win, right? No matter how you're looking at it, it's still a win because worst case scenario, I could have gone through the whole experience and then gone, nope, that was terrible. I don't want to do that again. So I wouldn't do it again. But when I was a kid, it felt like life and death. Today, it was like, bah, whatever, I'll give it a try. And I think there's a huge distinction there. I like that you brought that up.
Absolutely. And it's like for you, that wasn't a life or death situation or didn't feel like it. For someone else, if they have a hard time saying no, or they have a hard time leaving certain situations. And so for them, it was like they really felt trapped, you know?
Yeah.
Is a completely different experience than if like you actually know in your being, I am willing to get up and walk out of here. As opposed to not being able to locate that in yourself, even though you do have it, you know, it's like you haven't been able to embrace that part of you yet. You're kind of just flailing about.
Or maybe you don't realize because you've never had the luxury or the support to reinforce this idea that we all have a no that needs to be honored. And I think that's true of lots of people, that they don't have the experience of people saying, yes, I hear you, I honor you. It can be very hard.
Absolutely. That feels like a huge topic, the topic of no. But
another one.
You're right. If you have no practice saying that or enacting that,
practicing it.
You have to have people hear your no, respect your no for it to matter and for you to be willing to use it as a strategy.
Yeah, and know that no is an option. And that's what made it possible for me to do this ridiculous workout, because at any point I could have said nope and walked away. But knowing that I had that exit route made it possible for me to continue and go through to the end.
Like you have to be able to feel your no to actually say yes to anything.
Knowing I could leave meant I could stay.
And just be in the experience and be like, this is going to be what it's going to be.
And I'm up for it. Here we go.
All right, let's leave it there. Let's leave it there today. Like and subscribe. We're on YouTube, Spotify.
Reach out. Send us a message. We'll respond.
Yes, for sure. All right.
Thank you.
Till next time. Bye.